Perfect. Well, we like to start on time, 3 minutes late on time. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining. I'm super excited today to talk to Michelle Lee. Michelle is amazing. I think we've known each other for like 4 years and kind of watched each other grow up in the sustainability space, sort of around the same time. I won't say at the same pace because you are about 15 light years ahead of me, but nevertheless at the same time during the same time window. So just some notes so folks can drop things into the chat, into the Q&A anytime you want. I'll repeat this a couple times, but we're going to talk a lot about employee engagement during this session. So if you want to chime in with employee engagement projects, scenarios, programs that you guys have run that you think are interesting, you can shoot me a direct message or put in the chat. And if they sound particularly interesting, we'll call on you and make it kind of more of a discussion about what's really working in climate related employee engagement. But I'm really excited to spend the next hour or so with Michelle Lee. Michelle is one of the founder of Clever Carbon, and really like you've built this name for yourself as somebody who can teach people about the basics of climate change in a fairly approachable way. You run the Carbon Newbie Summit, which is exactly what it is named. Is like, here's how all these different things in the carbon and sustainability universe work. You still do climate literacy. We'll talk about coffee in a minute. That's what you were spending your morning on. And then you do a lot of programs at very, very high levels with experts and at the lower levels with people new to this. So I want to backtrack and start off with your founding story in climate, because I think in some ways it's not traditional. You weren't a environmental scientist. You didn't study this in college. You didn't get your master. Like you just sort of got interested, started doing some stuff. So backtrack 4 years or whatever it was. What got you interested, and what were some of those first things you started doing?
I think personally, like I've always cared about the environment and it was mostly just came as like common sense, right? Like using a reusable mug, reusable bags. And I actually do have a science background. I have a bachelor's and master's degree in science. I actually studied cancer genetics and I was like in a lab pipetting, like goggles, all of it, but then moved into business and found myself in Silicon Valley in 2013, which is kind of where I started working in tech, and I ended up working for companies like Salesforce and DocuSign. But through that experience as well, I think that's an important part of my personal journey because I saw how business could be, leveraged for good and how doing business for good could also engage and energize your workforce. So at Salesforce, we have this thing called voluntary time off, VTO. So if you're like in the halls at Salesforce and you say like, hey, like when are you taking your VTO? What are you doing? Like, everyone knows because it's actually part of how you get evaluated as an employee. And so you have like 7 days, I think, to take off. And for me, that was something that I was really proud of, right? To work for a company who cared about social impact, who gave us time to give back to the community. I remember doing team events where we would go to food banks together, and it was like a lot of fun and a nice switch up from just being in the office all the time. So when I worked for DocuSign, actually, I was there for almost 4 years. I was part of the IPO, which was such a cool experience. And I was in San Francisco for about 3 years with DocuSign, and then I moved to London with DocuSign. And a few things happened because when I moved to London, like I always thought I was doing great. In 2017, I went vegan vegetarian. I, was composting and I was using reusable stuff. And then I moved to London, and you can, at a convenience store, at a bodega, refill your shampoo with a bottle that you bring, right? Like these are convenience stores. And this is not something that we normally think of as convenient, like to bring in our bottle and refill it and weigh it and pay for our shampoo that way. There were so many organic, plastic-free products at the convenience stores. The public transportation was incredible. You could take the train to Paris as well, and then go everywhere else around the world. So moving to Europe actually inspired me to do a little bit more, and it showed me that I knew very little about sustainability. Like it's not just about eating vegetarian and using reusables. There's a lot of other things. And one of the things that I did at the office at DocuSign was I hosted Veganuary. So we had a small office. We had around like 70 employees. I was, I'd been there about 6 months. I didn't really know everyone, but I raised my hand to organize Veganuary. So what that meant is I formed a little team. I found other employees at DocuSign that were interested in doing this together. And then we essentially brainstormed and had this roadmap of what we were going to do for January to help people learn more about vegan eating. I think people think like, oh, I have to be perfect, I have to eat vegan every single meal, and like, the stuff tastes bad. It's like all like, walnut roasts and, so like in London,
Tempeh, just too
Sunday
much
roast.
tempeh. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of tempeh. But like Sunday roast is such a big thing. Like you go to a pub, you have your Sunday roast, or you have, Sunday roast with your friends. And when you go to the pubs, it's always like a nut roast, which is disgusting. So like people have this like just feeling that like it doesn't taste good, blah 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 blah. So we really wanted to just like show people that you don't have to be perfect. There's a lot of variety and it can be a lot of fun. So we had a committee about like 5, 6 people. And one thing that we did was everybody brought in a vegan cookbook, and then we had a library in the office in January. So when people were taking breaks or, eating their lunch, they could flip through the cookbooks and just, get inspired. We did vegan burger lunch run. So, just a casual invite, hey, let's meet, 12 p.m. at the door. We would all go down together and, try a vegan burger place. And actually, our head of sales, Andy, came and bought burgers for everybody. So we had buy-in from senior leadership at the office, which was just incredible. Then we did a vegan bake sale, which is actually really fun because people have to like experiment with different ingredients, like what replaces egg, what replaces milk and butter, and learn new things and get to taste
Hmm.
things. And then I convinced the company to give me budget so that we could go do a vegan pasta cooking class together. And that was really fun. And it was like at a really nice kind of hipster place. So we all had so much fun. But to this day, like that was in 2020, right before COVID. To this day, they still do it at the office. And it was entirely employee led, an initiative that I got to take on. I had so much fun. I got to meet new people in the office. So, all of these different things then led me to start Clever Carbon. And part of the impetus was COVID. I saw so much single-use items, so much waste, and I was volunteering for a local plastic-free uh, sort of community organization. And I just, wanted to kind of experiment with my own ideas, my branding, and that's kind of how Clever Carbon started. And I think what's really unique about our approach is that, we do it in a hip and fun way. We don't say like, this is bad, you're wrong, this is doom, like nothing like that. It's all just data. And I think we try to create a really delightful and fun experience so people want to come back, right? The moment you kind of go to the doomsday and you point fingers, people are just not interested. So we try to do it in a way where people don't even know that they're on a sustainability page. Like I think everyone knows now, but that was the original inspiration.
What worked first? Because there's a lot of you were not the first person to think like, oh, cool, let me run a few programs for people. Maybe some companies will pay me. Maybe something will land. Maybe there'll be other ways to do this. I'm sure there was a few experiments that didn't work, but like, what really began to feel like, oh yeah, this is the program or the effort or the thing I'm doing that people are really resonating with.
I think we made a couple of early decisions that led to success. One is the branding. It has to be fun. It has to be enterprise level. It has to be something that people look like and trust that it's a real brand. And then it has to be short. Like people don't have time to sit down, to get out their electricity bills and do all those things. Like you lose them on question number 5. So it has to be short. But then there's always trade-offs, right? Like what we do is edutainment. It's
Hmm.
not necessarily. Like if you want to know your exact carbon footprint, A, it would probably be impossible. Two, you'd be sitting at your desk for like probably a full day, like entering all your information. So making it easy, making it accessible. And what we really thought about is like, how do we scale this, right? So our carbon footprint quiz is about 5 questions long, and it's translated into probably like 10 to 12 languages now. So that I think we just originally made some pretty good bets. And it's hard to say what didn't work. I think we had some like fun ideas in the beginning, and I don't know if they worked or not, but like for example, we had a carbon footprint playlist on Spotify. They were all breakup songs. So like Taylor Swift, I Never Ever Want to Be With You Again, or something like that. Or and like, somebody I used to know. And the idea was to like get people to like nominate songs. And we used to do that on a regular basis. We don't really do it anymore just because we have so many great ideas for content that we didn't have time. We don't have time, like enough bandwidth for.
Yeah.
I still think it's fun. I think it's like
Yeah.
cheeky, but um, I think the one learning that I have through Clever Carbon is like if you are a new brand and you want to engage with the general public and get people to do things, it is very difficult. It is very difficult to get the reach
Yeah.
and then to actually get them to do something like take the quiz, post it online, share it here, share it there. So for everyone who is aspiring to like start their own consumer brand, like, it's a difficult task, not to say that it's impossible, but definitely chat with other folks that have done it before.
Yeah. Well, I want to tell me about the corporate side of things because when you started in 2020, 2021, that was when pretty much a lot of corporate sustainability programs were reporting into HR, and the ones
Mhm.
that weren't were reporting into marketing. Like
Yeah.
sustainability at a company was a communications engagement, either customer engagement or employee engagement uh strategic position. It was definitely not a compliance thing. It was
Mhm.
definitely not a CFO thing. It wasn't a strategic thing. It was
Yeah.
how do I, I got young employees running this crazy Veganuary thing. How do I keep them around? I got
Mhm.
some, I'm a consumer brand and I got these young customers who care about this. How do I get them to click on my Instagram ad? That
Yeah.
was where the market was when you started, which I imagine was a really good fit. The market in
Mhm.
some ways has moved. The
Mhm.
market in every way has moved to corporate sustainability, but it has moved much more into a CFO's office, into a general counsel's office. But you're still running very successful employee engagement programs, and that is like I'm going to say fallback, but I mean it in a positive way. That is something that continues to exist and be strong no matter what. So walk through
Yeah.
like what it was like to work with companies in 2021 when the budgets were specifically for employee engagement, what that was like, and then
Yeah.
how's that changed the last 4 years?
Yeah. I mean, we, I just a little bit of context, right? Like we teach people about carbon footprint and carbon literacy. And coming from tech companies, I know that there are budgets for engagement, for lifelong learning, for enablement for people culture. Like those things are important. And as a first kind of like, well, can I make this my full-time thing? Like, what can I do that would actually get me a roof over my head? And I remember I was working for this startup tech company. I think there were like 120 people at this company. And it was during COVID, and we had this kind of full day of like our kind of virtual retreat. And we had this an hour and a half session with this speaker who was talking about mental health. And I learned later that she was paid like $6,000 for doing this 1.5 like hour session. And I was like, maybe I could do
How do
that.
I get on that? It feels good to me.
So for sustainability, because like I've been part of those myself at all these different tech companies I've worked for. And I think that this is a really important topic for employers. Like, I think I've said this like 50 times this week, but post college and university, our employers play such an important role in individual learning, whether it's mental health, fitness and well-being, diversity and inclusion, COVID, and AI, right? Our employers are actually giving us these skills, and sustainability and climate are absolutely key and part of that sort of wellness, I would say. And that's kind of the message that I get. So actually, when I prospect now, I have two targets. One is someone who is in sustainability, but also directly to HR and people culture teams. And in terms of how it's changed over time, I don't necessarily think that it has changed that I don't think there's been that big of a difference. I think there's like different factors at play that influence whether a company wants to do this workshop, today and this year. But I think a lot of the times, like some of my bigger clients, like MasterCard, for example, the ESG team worked in partnership with the HR team to bring this to the employees. So we had someone from the ESG team who opened the session, and then I did the workshop, and the ESG team came to close the session, but it was hosted by HR, right? They have all the materials, the employee lists, to set all these things up. And depending on the company, it's a little bit different. But I have law firms as clients, I have tech companies, I have health companies, consulting companies, design, everything. I think it's hard to find content that is engaging, and it's hard to get the knowledge and expertise to do it yourself. So, there's still a market for this out there. And I have some materials prepared if I can share my screen and kind of show you.
Yeah, yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's see.
You have screen sharing power. There you go. We see you.
There we go. Okay. So I'm very lucky to call the MBA one of my clients. They were one of my original clients, actually. And this was Earth Day at their office about maybe 2, 3 years ago.
Large event. I've done about 6 of these sessions so far this week for Earth Week. And
So like this is their office. Of course, their canteen, their lunchroom is like a basketball court. And that's my first time working with the MBA. And you see here, this was like part of like the staff. So in addition to me coming in that day, they had some local vendors come in, a little farmer's market. This is Jazz, their workplace manager, Jessica, also part of their workplace team. And Jim is from Aramark, who is the caterer for their lunch type of like, yeah, their catering services. And then from there, our relationship grew a little bit. Like it went from employee engagement to then customer and fan engagement. And you can imagine what an incredible platform the MBA has when it comes to engaging external folks and customers and fans. So we have a carbon footprint quiz, and we have our own branding, but the MBA Green, they have their branding. And during some of their games, they put the quiz on the Jumbotron and the QR code, so fans in the arena can find out their carbon footprint, get their MBA Green badge. And they actually like had it on TV as well. And, it was really fun experience working with the team to come up with the right copy for the broadcaster. And the first time we did it, it actually broke our website because so many people came that our hosting company thought that we were being attacked by a virus. So yeah, fun
That's
time.
always a fun feeling.
Yeah.
Fun when it's working.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's an example. And then this is Annie. Annie leads sustainability and impact at MBA. And she is a thought leader in the sports space as well. And we've been lucky to work with Annie. And she speaks at our Carbon Newbie Summit, and she'll be there this year as well.
That's awesome. How did you what did the NBA like get out of this? So talk specifically, and it's a little tricky to do with some things like employee engagement, but everyone in sustainability right now is obsessed with ROI. How are you going to get this? What's the ROI of complying with laws, not complying with laws, investing in this? There's risk about talking about this. We can this was again 2 years ago. You did this, so it's slightly different. But today, I know companies who are afraid to put out an ESG report that they've been doing for 10 years because they're worried about what the federal government's going to possibly, maybe, somewhat, could possibly, maybe do to them.
Yeah.
How has communicating about this stuff changed over the last couple of years? Because I appreciate the point you're probably going to make, which is employees still care about this, and the younger or more educated you are, the more probably you care about climate related issues, and makes you feel good to be a part of this. But companies still need to, in the NBA case, put this on a jumbotron or on TV, in a company space. Maybe put this on LinkedIn, maybe. I just like it's a for some reason a contentious issue, and it is right now. There's not denying that. So how do companies either justify doing this today, or what gets them over the line, or how do they talk about it in a way that makes them feel safe?
I think it's a core business value. I think for the MBA, they feel that they have a responsibility. They know that a lot of people love coming out to games. There's a lot that is consumed, there's waste that is generated. So how can they do better? And teams also have individual agency to pursue their own initiatives. So for example, the Golden State Warriors, we've had the opportunity to work with them as well. And I did a little tour of their composting facilities. They were testing a reusable cup scheme, but some of it also came from policy. Like in California, there was going to be a policy coming out around plastic waste. And so
Hmm.
the team was exploring that reusable cup scheme. In some cases, it saves money, right? If they have a composter on site, they don't have to use, paper ecology to haul this stuff out. And again, I think it's a core value, and for the MBA, they have a huge social impact program. So it's not just sustainability, it's mental health, it's youth, it's communities. And the MBA is a part of the UN sports framework. There's a little bit more of a technical term for it, but like it's a core value, it's a commitment. Um,
Hmm.
but in general, I just had this conversation with CNOT actually
Hmm.
around responsible business as opposed to maybe sustainability or climate, using words like responsible business might resonate with certain companies where sustainability isn't a core value. And we're also seeing a lot of other organizations really put an emphasis on nature. Like, Salesforce is a really natural one that I think of. They've got a whole nature and AI program. They've got
Hmm.
a nature team. Like, this is a big tech company. They have someone on their team that is specifically responsible for ocean initiatives. And they're really leading the way when it comes to responsible business and business for good.
Yeah. I think one trend that's been happening a little bit is, while there can still be debate about um longer term issues like climate, not necessarily debate of like real climate change is real or not. There's certainly plenty of that, but like whether or not it's a company's responsibility to do something, whether or not it actually impacts the company, what happens in 2050 or 2100, whether or not, even if it does impact the company, what they should do about it. And so that's a bit of the I think underlying question behind a lot of these issues is like, all right, fine, climate change is real. All right, fine, companies uh obviously contribute to that, but is that my problem in the year 2025? Fine, that can be discussed. Some people say I'm going to take a stance on it. Some people say no. But shorter term issues are much harder to debate. So the impact of a natural disaster on you today, the
Yeah.
impact of Texas floods, where you have customers or employees living, that's a very tangible impact. Maybe the hypothetical impact of what's going to happen to hurricanes in Texas in 2050 is not, but today it's a massive issue. And I think
Mhm.
the same thing is happening in not like things just outside of traditional climate. For example, ice melt and polar bear extinction. Yeah, is that a company's problem? It's very sad, but like, should I spend $1 million on that? Probably not. Ocean plastic is a short-term issue that you can look at and see today and do something about today. Like, you can actually take action on that. So I think it's probably why companies are just looking more towards short-term problems and short-term solutions so they can justify that stuff really, really easily. just a take, I'm curious if you agree or disagree with that take, either being true or being how you would diagnose why companies are changing a little bit. But I'm also curious, you guys, you're specifically doing a lot more with the ocean right now. What kinds of programs are you beginning to work with companies around the ocean?
Yeah. Um, it is kind of you mentioned like, ice is melting and polar bears are going extinct and there's actually a lot more behind the science around ice melting and the issues that that is going to cause beyond things like sea level rise. The so our ocean is stratified, so we have the surface layer, we have the deep layer. The deep layer has nutrients that are really important for the surface layer, and the surface layer has oxygen because that's where you have your phytoplankton, your cyanobacteria, and phytoplankton and the ocean is responsible for 50% of Earth's oxygen. But without nutrients from the deep layer of the ocean, they can't thrive. So the mixing of the layers is extremely important, and it is driven by currents and by water density. So salt water is more dense, it goes to the bottom. Cold water is more dense, it goes to the bottom. And right now what's happening is our oceans are warming and the ice is melting. So the water is less salty and there's less mixing of the ocean and the currents are being disrupted. And so, in terms of like how you even draw a line to your business to something like the ocean, like it is difficult because the literacy and the knowledge isn't there. But most companies, do something on the ocean because 95% of our goods are shipped through the ocean. So as an example, you will have even if you're a tech company, data center, the equipment in the data center, it all went through the ocean, right? If you're in agriculture, there's a lot of agricultural runoff, so the chemicals will eventually flow into the ocean. So it's not even like a microplastics problem. We have like a, chemical problem with the ocean. And one of my goals right now is to help companies understand their relationship and we move beyond terrestrial things. I think there is a lot of tree planting, which is, important, fantastic. We all see trees. I see a tree in your background right there, right? It's things that we can see, we love, we know they're good, but most of the incredible things in the ocean are below water. We can't see them. Corals, marine life, sea turtles, dolphins, seahorses, all of it. So how do we help people connect those dots and understand? And, I do two workshops. One is on carbon footprint, like your basics of carbon footprint, but also talking about CO2 atmospheric concentration. We were at 429 parts per million in June. What does that mean? Why is that important? But all the way down to the basics, like what is carbon footprint? What is my carbon footprint? What is the carbon footprint of common items? And then I now have an ocean workshop to help people learn about why the ocean is important. And I will say that that is a really hard workshop to convince companies that, this is a good thing that they should spend money on
And
because
it's because they don't see the stuff. Like they just have, because
yeah,
everyone knows coral and sea animals exist, but it's, out of
yeah,
sight, out of mind.
it's that. It's like we haven't even done something on carbon footprint. So like the ocean seems like,
Mm,
it's like the next level or five.
yeah.
So we need to
Yeah.
start with the basics first. But like personally, I think it's a great entry level workshop as well because people love the ocean. They love whales, they love beaches and all of that. It's a great way to just connect with everybody. But the reason why I even have that workshop is because one of my clients, a healthcare company, they did my carbon footprint workshop like 4 or 5 times and they're like, okay,
Yeah. What's next? Yeah.
what do you have something new? And I pitched them, an ocean workshop. I didn't have it at the time, but the person who was responsible for like, employee engagement on sustainability, she had a marine biology degree. So she's working for this healthcare company now. And she said, yes, like I have to find those people in the companies that have a natural affinity for the ocean.
Hmm.
and many people do. And that's how this ocean, this workshop came about. And then, I had another sort of repeat customer that was looking for another workshop and then did the ocean one. But I think people like they're grappling with, emissions. And
Hmm.
so then like the ocean is like the next 5 or 6
Yeah.
steps in their
You got
mind.
to give them something that they're currently working on, and this is very like in addition to all the stuff that they're doing. It's also probably, I mean, if you're, which you only sometimes go through, but if you're going through the sustainability person at a company, they're trying to convince finance and HR and operations and everyone to give them all this data that they need on their carbon footprint. It
Mhm.
is probably very helpful to them to educate everybody on what a carbon footprint even is and do so from a third party, not themselves, to make it seem more objective. So, like, it's in line with their existing goals, and you're just helping further that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, as we kind of wrap up here, I want to talk a little bit about just what you're focused on now. What are some of the things besides the ocean programming that you're really focused on developing? What are you super, super excited about? And then what are some challenges that you're facing, either you directly as Clever Card in the business, or what are some challenges that keep coming up over and over again that you're seeing your clients, these companies face?
In terms of what we're working on right now, we really want to move to the next level when it comes to carbon literacy. I think people kind of understand what carbon footprint is, that they know that they have their own carbon footprint, though they may not know what it is, how it's measured, what it's measured in. They kind of have a sense that like items, objects in their lives have a carbon footprint. So like
Mhm.
that's fine. But what we're really focused on and what I want to do more of is what's the bigger picture? Like, what's the so what? Like it's like knowing that your meal is 600 calories, but not knowing what your daily caloric intake should be, right? So what I
Interesting.
want to do is help people understand like we are at 429 parts per million. At pre-industrial levels, we were at 280 parts per million. So in over the last, just few hundred years, we've really increased the CO2 concentration by a lot. But what does that even mean? Experts say that if we surpass 450 parts per million, we will surpass the 1.5 degrees Celsius target set by the Paris Agreement. But what does the 1.5 degrees Celsius even mean? So actually, Shannon on my team is now working on a short engagement series on what 1.5 degrees Celsius actually means. Because like, in Fahrenheit,
Everyone says it, but no one knows what
what it
what'll happen. No.
yeah, like in the morning in
Well, I
Canada,
get a
like,
text. Did someone text me saying congratulations, we did it? Like what
yeah,
actually happens? Yeah.
exactly. Um, so we want to help people better understand, what does it mean that we're 429 now? We shouldn't surpass 450, that's the threshold. And experts say that we need to be at or below 350 parts per million. Some say that we actually need to be back at 280 parts per million. How do we do that? How do we get there? We actually need gigaton scale of carbon removal. That's one of the things that experts are saying, but what is gigaton? How do we do that? And like, let's say, okay, Adriel, let me ask you this. We were at 429 parts per million last month. Let's say, it's now a perfect world. Every company is net zero. What do you think the CO2 concentration will be next year?
Probably 429 parts per million. You got to take stuff out.
So we're not any closer to 350 or 280, right? So in order for us to actually get back to 350 or 280, we need to scale carbon removal like massively.
Yeah. Which to finish up here, you host the Carbon Newbie Summit, which is a hit. I went to your San Francisco event 3 or 4 months ago, and you got another one coming up in New York on September 23rd.
Yep.
And that was a big part of this year's Carbon Union Summit. You had a bunch of talks about how carbon removal works. What are some of the more creative companies doing different work? Who are the investors investing behind carbon removal and why? So carbon removal is the big focus of the years, or certainly was 3 months ago. What do you think will be some of the focus of the talks you're going to have at September 23rd, New York Carbon Union Summit?
Yeah. We will have a bunch of different talks. Like Annie's gonna come back. She's gonna talk a little bit about the work that they're doing at the MBA. We are in conversations with a really major HVAC company. So, green buildings and decarbonizing building emissions.
Mhm.
We are in talks with a data center company. So also, a huge source of our emissions right now is our tech consumption, obviously AI
Mhm.
right up there. And then we'll also have some talks focused on the ocean. Organizations like the Prince of Monaco Foundation. They are really pioneers in the blue economy, doing a lot of incredible work for the ocean. They were part funders of the new David Attenborough documentary.
Mhm. That
And
dude's amazing. He's like 109 years old and he's still putting stuff out.
no, and
Stud.
I think that was like one of his most important ones, like that he put out is the one on the ocean. I think I saw it a commercial where he was like, I've done a lot of documentaries, like this one is the most important one. It's available on Disney Plus, I believe, and probably other media outlets. So, catch it. And um just we're in chats with some other organizations. I don't want to give too much away, but we have CNOT back as a sponsor, as well as GigaBlue. GigaBlue is a blue carbon project developer doing marine carbon dioxide removal. We call it marine CDR. CNOT, they help companies procure carbon credits in a way that is, helps most of us aren't experts, especially when it comes
Mhm.
to quality. They're a great group out of San Francisco, so should be a fun one. And maybe we'll do something with Beehive. Let's see.
There we go. One can hope. Perfect. Michelle, where should people find you, reach out to you, follow your work? Where do they go?
Our website's a great place to start. So clevercarbon.io. We produce a lot of content on our Instagram and our LinkedIn page. The Carbon Newbie Summit. You'll find all the links there from our website itself. And then the coffee menu, actually, do we have a minute to talk about that?
Yeah, we do. Actually, I should have started with that. That's how I met you 4 years ago, is I
Okay.
saw a carbon footprinted coffee menu in some coffee shop. I don't even remember where in New York.
Mhm.
And I was like, this is cool. I'm trying to get into climate. Whoever did this is a cool person. Sean loves the coffee menu, threw in a
Yeah.
thing there. And you're still doing that today. So yeah, we should have started that. Let's talk about the coffee menu.
Well, I have like a giant size one right now because I did an event today. But
I
essentially,
saw one, the one you had in New York was like this big, and you
yeah.
convinced some coffee shop owner to just put it by the cash register. It's lattes, whatever. Yeah.
But it's people like don't know that coffee has a carbon footprint and what it is in relation to things like a cappuccino or a latte. Actually, the majority of our carbon footprint comes not from the coffee itself, but from the dairy if you're drinking it with milk. And paper cup lid and sleeve, that was like my original inspiration. I was like, oh my God, like there's so much trash. How can we eliminate that? And you can print it out for free. You can put it on your website. Sorry, you can put it in your kitchen. And I'm going to share my screen here.
Yeah.
So shout out to Sean when he was at Asana. It was displayed at the near the coffee shop at the company. But this year, I had the opportunity to do a workshop with Okta for Earth Day. And Mike Chen, who is one of the sustainability folks there, I made a special coffee menu for them. And across their Dublin, Chicago, San Francisco, New York, like Japan office, every office displayed the coffee menu during Earth Day. And I hope it's still up now. And then there was a QR code that went to their internal employee page with sustainability resources so that they could know like what's going on during Earth Day for that. And DocuSign is also a client of mine, and obviously I used to work there as well. They have their version of the carbon footprint quiz, but we also made a little fun coffee menu for them for their customer conference momentum. So
Oh,
they're
I see Julie Schumann right there. Look at
that is
that.
truly
That's my
exactly.
pal.
Yeah. So it's a free resource. It's translated into 13 different languages. You can print it for free, and frame it and, just pretend, oh, like who put it there? I have no idea. And then, and then like just have people, it's kind of like a water cooler conversation. Oh, like, do
Yeah,
coffee has a carbon footprint? Wait a second.
yeah.
Does wine and orange juice, do those things have a carbon footprint? Like what else? And then the idea is that they then go and like do a little research and get into that rabbit hole, and it's a journey, right? And you need that impetus, you need that spark, and hopefully this resource is there to provide that spark.
Yeah, I mean, what's awesome about all this stuff is that like so much of a corporate sustainability person's job is so ethereal and so high level. I'm gonna measure the entire company's emissions. I'm going to buy these offsets that no one's ever seen before, knows what they are at something called a metric ton. I'm going to publish an ESG report, which is this like half strategic, half visual thing. Like it's such a high. I'm going to talk about a science-based target for 2045. It's such a long term, hard to put your hands on project.
Yeah.
But then when you bring this in, it's not saving the world immediately, but it's fairly straightforward. I was like, oh, this one cup of coffee, like let's at least think about this one tangible, real thing right now in this moment, not what is the entire supply chain and I need to send everybody a quiz to understand where did I get my coffee. Just like think about it. It's a coffee.
Yeah.
Don't stop drinking it. Coffee's the best. But like, just
Yeah.
think about it and realize it and bring it into your own world. And you're bringing these like very hard to understand concepts into a very simple, tangible, straightforward example that then starts conversations, make me as the ESG person look better, make my colleagues more willing to give me the information I need for my ethereal carbon emissions projects because they now understand some of this stuff. So you're just making all this much easier to grasp for people who don't spend our whole day thinking about it.
Exactly. And I would love to hear from the audience, like if there are examples of how you engaged employees during Earth Day or just, on a regular basis. And maybe as people are kind of putting those examples in the chat, another thing that we didn't really touch on is ESG targets and employee bonuses. So MasterCard is an example. They implement this. It's a company-wide metric. And if the company hits that, the employees get a bonus. And I was just talking to another Canadian grocery retailer that is also doing something similar. But I think that there's so many easy opportunities to leverage opportunities like onboarding, during employee onboarding. Like, do your employees know that you have a report? Do employees know what your emissions are today, what your base year was, where you're going today? Do you invite them on the journey of like, if you want to be involved, if you have ideas on how we can reduce our impact, etc., like this is how you can get engaged. Like, I think the onboarding process is such a key moment, and you can do all the reporting that you want, you can do all the certifications that you want, but internally, if your employees don't even know about this, have never even looked at the report, like there's just a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah. The employee compensation one's interesting. I just read that Mars, the candy company and one of the largest like agriculture users in the world, increased the number of employees who have compensation tied to climate goals from 300 to 2,000.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
doing stuff like that is interesting. I'm actually I don't have a very firm opinion on it that it's necessarily a good thing. My counterexample is that anytime climate is seen as this other thing over here, I am
Mhm.
not 100% certain that is a good thing. So other things don't necessarily have specific compensation goals tied to them. Why should climate? I think that causes sometimes a backlash that is unnecessary and may or may not move things forward in the right way. There could be a lot of good in it. could also be some unintended consequences to it. So I'm uncertain about it. But the onboarding thing is really interesting because everyone works so hard to get any amount of attention on their report, engagement at their events, like
Mhm.
focus on this stuff. That if you can get these employees as they're really excited, open-eyed, excited about joining your company. Oh, what do they do? What do they do about this? How do I do this? How do I make myself look good? How do I like get involved in stuff? That's your chance to make a voluntary, not required onboarding event where you run it every 2 weeks or every month to say, hey, everyone who joined in the last 6 months is welcome to come learn about all the stuff we do and the way you can get involved. I think that's awesome. I think it's really cool. One thing that Kelsey just commented was that they had different business lines share about ESG from their perspective. So how did risk talk about it as a perspective from collateral? How did risk talk about it as part of the portfolio from a collateral perspective, wealth and investing, resources for employees? So different people throughout the company, different teams throughout the company can talk about this in different ways. I want you, Michelle, maybe to touch on how a sustainability person inside the company can better use programs like this to get in touch with different departments because they're a core part of their job. And kind of Kelsey brings this up as a great opportunity to do so. And while you're talking, I expect Sean to put in something he's done around employee engagement because you started this idea on LinkedIn. So this is your big chance. And I see Terry just post something too. So we'll get to that in a second.
Mhm. So repeat your question one more time, Adriel.
How can a sustainability person at a company use programs like the ones you run to better bring in people from different departments and get them all involved in their work?
Yeah. I think sustainability folks have this really big challenge. Like you did ask me about challenges that I see. It's like on the one hand, they don't want to make too much noise, have too much attention, and then there's more stakeholders, and then it gets complicated. But then at the same time, obviously, having more engagement means maybe down the line in the future, they can have more buy-in, they can have more budget. It really becomes a core value of the company. So I just want to put that into the space, but we at Clever Carbon actually have an employee engagement program called Clever Actions. I will say that we probably haven't worked on it for about a year and a half, 2 years now, because again, we have so many different priorities. And that's another example of it's like really hard to get people to do things. But in Clever Actions, there's over 100 different actions that a company can take to engage their workforce. And with Clever Actions, you can sort by level of effort. You can sort by, what United Nations Sustainable Development Goal you want to target, and which ones are good for remote versus in person. It's like very thorough, and it's still available today. It just hasn't been updated, but it just gives like easy ideas, like have a lunch and learn around sustainability, do a clothing swap at the workplace. For your next happy hour, incorporate more vegan items. And actually, the whole goal of it was the company could then check off that thing and accumulate points. And we even had a template slide deck that you can use to update how many clever actions you did, just to make it so easy to incorporate this into things like your all hands. So I'm still really proud of the work that we did on that program, but unfortunately, there's just a million things, and
So much to do.
it's just really hard to get it out and for people to like take time and try it.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. It's also, I think, especially if you have a more general role like ESG that encompasses a lot more than just climate, you have a challenge of being far too broad and not specific enough and getting your message lost and just become noisy. So if you try 7 things, that's too many things. Like you need to have one core program that's really working, that's really humming before you move on to the next one. So maybe it's the onboarding thing, maybe it's something like what you just described, maybe it's bringing an educational speaker series. But if you have 9 of them, you're not going to get people's attention. They won't know which one to go to, and they're not going to join. A couple cool ideas here. Well, I really like this one from Terry. he or she, I'm not sure, Terry goes both ways. Terry describes, let me know, I'm curious if you're he or she. Terry described something that they did with an old agency that they were at in the UK, where they partnered with a platform called GiveWheel, and asked employees to nominate charities, and then they matched donations to those charities. I've seen this done by a couple of groups before. A dude from Colorado, just a dude from Colorado, just a dude. You're the dude from Colorado, Terry. Um, and so that's a really cool thing to do. And I've seen a lot of this for actually, I think DocuSign, I think Julie was telling me that she does something similar where, a lot of companies do matching programs. But if you set up a few charities that are sort of in line with the kinds of things you want to be donating to and saying, here's specific programs you want to be doing, that's really interesting. I actually know one company um, that does this for disaster relief. And so
Mm,
they've pre-selected a bunch of disaster relief charities. And whenever some sort of natural disaster happens in an area where they have employees impacted,
mm,
any donation, they send out an email and say, hey, here's our disaster relief partners in this area. Any donation you make is automatically matched by our company. So they do this matching thing, but they do it specific around disaster relief after natural disasters. So that's how they tie sort of the climate program with the social giving program, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. And we had Benevity at DocuSign, so that was another one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, something similar. And then Sean gave the idea that they create an annual climate challenge for employees, which incentivize them or encourage them to change behavior across 15 different actions they can be taking at home or at work to reducing their footprint. And it sounds like there's amazing participation from a lot of people. So there's a lot of people who are saying, look, give me something to do that is manageable. Composting is actually an interesting idea. Just saying go compost, actually not that manageable. Like,
Mhm.
what do you mean? Like, what do I do? Where do I throw it? I don't have a garden. My city doesn't offer it. Oh, you mean I got to pay $30 a month? Like, it's actually, you can think it's an easy thing, but it's not such an easy thing, which is why when you just say, oh, just go compost, it falls on deaf ears because no one wants to change behavior.
Mhm.
But I know some companies who said, hey, composting, especially this, I'm thinking of a large restaurant company. They said, hey, composting is really important to us. And it's important to our business, it's important to food. We're not just going to tell you to go compost. We're going to do a bunch of work. And they took a look at like the 100 cities where they had their most employees and found the local composting options in each city and said, hey, Michelle, you're in Toronto. Here's your two options. Adriel, you're in Brooklyn. Here's your two options. And then for anyone who didn't have options, they also partnered with a company called Mill. Mill's
Mhm.
like a at-home composter that is normally $30 a month. And I think they
Yeah.
subsidized half of it. So they
Mhm.
said, and if none of these things work, but you still want to do something, go to
Mhm.
this link. We pay for half of it, whatever. They did all this work to set it up. So you can't just tell people, go change behavior. Just like you didn't say, go become a vegan. You
Yeah.
said, hey, I'm going to a burger place over here. You don't even have to do, I did the research, I did the stuff, head of sales was paying for it. Just like you just have to show up and everything else is done for me. And I think that's how you begin to get behavior change going is make that first step so easy to
Mhm.
try. And then look, if they're not going to do it, they're not going to do it. Like there's no convincing it's going to make them do it. But if they try it, then you can really get people going.
And just to add one more kind of dimension to this, like employee benefits are a great, other tool. So, maybe you want to get a renewable energy assessment for your home, or you maybe want a 401k option that, is divested from fossil fuels, or even just a national parks pass. Like imagine if your employee and you could get that covered by your employee,
It's awesome.
or, that $30 a month could be used towards something like composting or a more sustainable method of travel. I think it's a really fun way, and it's a signal that, there are ways in your personal life, and, the company's willing to support that. I would definitely look for that, if I ever join the company again, that would be really important to me.
Yeah, and it keeps people around. Um, Michelle, you're the best. Watching you over the last 4 years has been so impressive. I learned a lot. I appreciate it. I think the many thousands of people, probably tens of thousands of you, millions if you're talking about people who have seen you on TV through the NBA, but who have somehow engaged with the work that you've done, have been moved. Some people in small ways where they just thought about the footprint of their coffee for the first time, and some people in big, meaning you helped their careers or moved them forward or opened up their eyes to something new happening. So I appreciate the work that you're doing. I'm very excited for the Carbon Newbie Summit in New York on September 23rd. And I hope you'll follow clevercarbon.io or follow Michelle on LinkedIn, where you are amazing. Um, Everybody, we do this every single Thursday, and we have some really, really cool events coming up. I will drop the link to all of our events here. But next week, I'm doing a Beehive product deep dive. So if you're a customer or just interested in what we're doing, you can check that out. In 2 weeks, we're interviewing Donna Lee, who's the founder of Calix, which is one of the big offset rating agencies. She's awesome. Shortly after that is Brendan Maloney, who runs sustainability at DocuSign. And then in
Mhm.
August, the date is not confirmed, but this is going to be awesome. We are going to interview the woman who runs CARB, the California Air and Resources Board, who's putting together the regulations for SB 261 and SB 253. That'll be on the 7th and the 14th of August. So check them out, sign up. I hope to see you on a future
Oh,
Thursday.
the link isn't working.
The link isn't working. Oh my goodness.
No, I
The
don't
link
know.
isn't working.
Oh.
I'm glad you said something. I mean, can you imagine how embarrassing that is? The link is here. There you go. There's the link.
Uh,
That one works. That one works. I appreciate that. Lou.mus/user/beehive climate. Perfect. We got some good ones coming up. Thank you, Michelle. Saved me from a whole lot of trouble. I appreciate you, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Adriel.
Bye.